So let me explain a few things before we begin. This is not a competitive analysis of every Super Smash Bros. Ultimate character. This is a ranking of every Smash character based on how cool I think the inclusion of that character is in the grand scheme of Smash. Basically, a casual Smash ranking based off of my personal opinions and observations. I'm gonna try ignoring movesets as much as humanly possible, as I want to focus purely on the characters, who they are, and what they represent, though inevitably moveset talk will be unavoidable in some cases. I will be taking into account the context of how, when, and why they were included as it becomes relevant. There are a few exclusions I should mention. I will not be ranking any of the Echo Fighters simply because I don't have any inspired opinions on any of them. Additionally, I will be excluding Mario, Donkey Kong, Link, Kirby, Pikachu, Luigi, Peach, Bowser, Zelda, and Ganondorf. I'm doing this because their inclusions in the context of a Nintendo crossover fighter are inevitable and uninteresting. I'm glad they're all here, they should be here by all means, but their inclusions aren't terribly exciting because it's painfully obvious that they should be here, and thus makes them effectively impossible to rank in the same way as the other characters. For the sake of including every character in the discussion, I will do a brief segment on each of these characters right now outside of the ranking, but if you just want to skip to the ranking, there should be a timestamp in the description. Mario and Link are the protagonists of two of Nintendo's most successful and long-running franchises ever. It would be ridiculous if they weren't here. I honestly can't imagine Smash without them. Mario especially, there is no other character that could possibly be the number one on the roster. This is Mr. Nintendo right here. I have a bit more to say about Link, but that'll come up in the ranking when we talk about his clones. Similarly, the leading ladies of these two franchises were also inevitabilities. Zelda especially, she's the namesake of her series. I imagine they were only excluded from Smash 64 for the sake of including more unique properties, which was probably the right call. Either way, their positioning at the forefront of Melee's newcomers shows just how obvious their inclusions were. The protags, the ladies, and of course, the villains. Honestly, half the appeal of Smash to me is getting to properly play as these boss characters. It's so much fun. Bowser was a painfully obvious choice, probably the most famous video game villain ever, but Ganondorf here is kind of odd. Ganondorf in this form is only really in 3 main Zelda games. I personally would have opted for a more pig-like Ganon, but there's no denying that some form of the Demon King was inevitable for Smash. There's no way the Eternal Player 2 was ever not a frontrunner for the Smash roster. His ease of development certainly must have helped his case. It's kind of fascinating to see how, as Luigi evolved as a character outside of Smash, gaining more unique traits, his Smash incarnation gradually started to reflect that. If he wasn't inevitable back in 1999, with all his solo outings, he's certainly inevitable now. I don't have much to say on Pikachu that I didn't say about Mario and Link. The Electric Mouse only has its own section because it's not the protagonist of its series, just the mascot. That said, Pokemon is huge, and with no easy protagonist to implement, Pikachu makes all the sense in the world. Donkey Kong, the namesake of Nintendo's first smash hit in the arcades. With that legacy along with a strong showing of his own series, there was no way Donkey Kong was ever being left off this roster. His standing as a heavier protagonist also makes for more gameplay variety when looking at the original Smash 64 roster, just another point in the ape's favor. So Kirby isn't nearly as big as the other franchises we just talked about, but he certainly feels like one of Nintendo's go-to mascots. It feels like Kirby as a character is more prominent than his own games, which is saying something because he's got a lot of games. But let's be real, what really makes Kirby inevitable is who's working on these games. Masahiro Sakurai, and for Smash 64 and Melee, HAL Laboratories. Kirby is their baby, of course he should be here. Quickly running through the echoes, reclassifying Lucina and Dark Pit really makes their inclusions feel more worthwhile. They fit so perfectly with the concept, Lucina having impersonated Marth and Dark Pit literally being a clone of Pit. These two fit right in now. Dark Samus, Daisy, and Richter are all totally worthwhile given how they represent different parts of their respective series. The Metroid Prime games, the Mario spin-offs, and Castlevania Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. Without these guys, that representation would certainly feel a bit lacking. Ken just felt like a given as soon as we learned what an Echo Fighter was. I don't know Street Fighter all that well, but from what I can gather, people tend to like Ken's personality over Ryu's anyway, so I'm glad he's here. After Chrom got totally shafted in Smash 4, I'm glad they managed to find a way to squeeze him in here. Sure, it's another Fire Emblem character, but a highly requested one that was able to be quickly implemented. He finally got his chance. Alright, now let's actually start. If there was one character I could cut from the Smash Ultimate roster, it would be Corrin. Not that I hate this character or anything, Fire Emblem Fates was the first Fire Emblem game I played, so I honestly have a soft spot for him, but this guy is the main cause for all the Sword Fighter Fire Emblem hate. It doesn't help that every other Fire Emblem character that isn't an Echo represents a distinct era of Fire Emblem. Marth covers NES and SNES, Roy covers GBA, Ike covers GameCube and Wii, Robin covers 3DS, and Byleth covers the Switch. Corrin needlessly doubles up on 3DS representation. Not to mention how his inclusion felt like such a shameless promotional stunt for a game that wasn't even out worldwide yet. Pretty sure most people would agree that this is the single worst character inclusion in Smash. On the other end of the spectrum, I really never understood why Jigglypuff was here. I get that it's a joke character and probably easy to develop since you could use Kirby as a base, but now that the balloon Pokemon has been here for as long as it has, I really feel like it outstayed its welcome. At a certain point, the joke just stopped being funny. Not to mention it adds to the frankly absurd number of Kanto reps in the game when regions like Hoenn and Unova have plenty of potential for Smash characters. All I can really say in Jigglypuff's favor is that it kind of accidentally reps the new fairy type, but that isn't really reflected anywhere in its moveset, so it feels kinda empty. Of all the Melee clones, Dr. Mario definitely feels like the strangest choice. This is literally just Mario in a different outfit. He could very realistically be a skin. And frankly, do the relatively obscure Dr. Mario puzzle games really deserve a fighter in Smash? I'm gonna try and be nice about the Melee clone, since that game's absurd development cycle kinda justifies their existence, but in the context of the Ultimate roster, another clone of Mario feels really off. So Roy is the other character that feels like a blatant promotional stunt, seeing as Binding Blade came out after Melee. Not to mention Roy's game still hasn't managed to make it overseas in any way. They've certainly managed to make him feel much more distinct from Marth over time, but that doesn't change how not exciting Roy is when compared to the rest of the roster. Maybe a remake or localization of Binding Blade will change my mind, but for now, this is where Roy sits. Who asked for this? Of all the new Metroid reps they could have gone with, was Samus but without the power suit that makes her awesome really on anyone's mind? In the context of Brawl, having Samus's Final Smash destroy her suit is cool, but now that mechanic has disappeared and Zero Suit just takes up her own spot on the roster, the whole idea just feels kind of pointless now, especially given the much cooler Metroid reps we'd get in Ultimate. Not to mention how her Final Smash just puts her back in her power suit. They really had a hard time coming up with anything cool this character could do without the suit. Falco is weird, to say the least. This is another Melee clone, and certainly one that fits much better and is much cooler than Dr. Mario or Roy, but the whole idea of Falco is still kind of underwhelming. It's Fox, but he can jump higher and is kind of flashier. Falco would probably be even lower on this list if it wasn't for the fact that he does have a pretty fun personality, but it's hard to get excited about him. I really want Lucas to be higher, but it is so hard to justify when 99% of people have no idea where this kid comes from. If this was a Fire Emblem story and Lucas's popularity pushed Nintendo to localize Mother 3, we'd probably be talking about him a bit later, but as is, this is just blonde Ness with a snake. Take this low placement as yet another plea to get an official translation of this damn game. So I'm not gonna argue that Wii Fit Trainer doesn't deserve to be on the roster or anything. The popularity of Wii Fit and the Wii in general was absurd, and it makes sense to represent that. But this is just another case where this was clearly a joke character, and the joke is pretty old at this point. Personally, I enjoy joke/surprise characters a lot more when they're retro characters. With that, it feels like a piece of lost Nintendo history being preserved. Wii Fit did not need to be preserved. No one's forgetting that happened anytime soon, so this character just feels like a stale joke. Oh boy, how dare I have a major third-party character this low? Well, for starters, I don't know anything about Tekken, and generally from what I've heard, Tekken fans don't even really like Kazuya specifically. What really rubs me the wrong way about Kazuya was the context of his inclusion. This was another DLC fighting game character from a series that already had stuff in Smash, and it was the penultimate fighter, so hope for big reveals was really starting to drain. Generally, I find the implementation of fighting game characters in Smash to be kind of boring and awkward, so there's certainly some bias there, but it really felt like there was no excitement behind this character despite it being a third party. I also generally prefer third parties that have some clear ties to Nintendo, and Tekken just doesn't have that at all. All of this combined really makes Kazuya's inclusion feel like a massive disappointment, at least to me. Now we're starting to get to characters I actually kind of like. I have no real justification for Ice Climbers being above Kazuya, I just think they're neat. What a fun idea for a fighter, and what a bizarre NES game to represent. There are also very few characters in Smash themed around ice or snow, so they really feel appropriate overall. Obviously, that's not enough to get them very far in this ranking, but it's something. Weirdly, I really like Pichu's inclusion. I think it's the perfect way to represent Johto under time constraints. Breeding and baby Pokemon were two of the big new features in that generation, so showcasing that by making Pichu a more reckless Pikachu clone is kind of perfect. Obviously not incredibly exciting, but weirdly fitting. Pichu is also very cute, and that is always going to earn extra points. Ike as a new Fire Emblem rep for the Wii Smash game kinda feels inevitable in hindsight, but the idea of a heavier, more powerful sword fighter was cool at the time. Always a fan of getting representation for newer games in the series while still making the characters feel very distinct. Despite having watched full playthroughs of both of Ike's games, I don't really have much more to say about him. He's cool, glad he's here, but my lack of things to say kinda shows why he's not any higher. So Smash's habit of introducing a new Pokemon rep for the new generation is fine by me, but by the time we got Incineroar, the pattern was pretty predictable, draining a lot of potential hype. What sells Incineroar specifically is the pro wrestler route they took with it, and that's fun, but it's not enough to ignore the general lack of excitement surrounding this character, not to mention how he disconfirmed the Grinch leak, which maybe is unfair to consider, but I have a hard time thinking about Incineroar's reveal without thinking of the Grinch leak. So the different links in Smash are certainly interesting. It's an odd way to try and represent The Legend of Zelda given how many other characters could have represented games like Wind Waker or Minish Cap, but Toon Link does work surprisingly well. It kind of future-proofs Zelda representation, including the different incarnations of the protagonist. Like, Toon Link was included before Triforce Heroes existed, but there's no doubt that Toon Link is the protagonist there, so he kind of ends up representing that game. There are certainly more exciting ways to have done this, but having a goofy, cartoony version of Link is fun in its own right. As fun as Captain Falcon is in Smash, I don't think anyone would really care if he got revealed as a newcomer in today's context. I'm always a fan of new Nintendo series getting represented, but F-Zero standing as a racing game where we see very little of the characters actually in the cars makes Captain Falcon lose any real impact he should have. It's telling that his entire moveset holds no real references to his games. I'm glad F-Zero is represented, but the very nature of that series makes that representation uninteresting to me. Fox falls into the same camp as Captain Falcon for me. Nothing about Fox really screams Star Fox, because that series is all about flying spaceships, something that can't really be showcased in a Smash fighter. Not to mention, Star Fox is just not all that interesting a franchise to me. Again, I'm glad that there are as many distinct Nintendo properties represented as there are, but Fox and Captain Falcon just don't actually represent their games all that well. Rob is ridiculous and probably shouldn't be as high as he is, but I don't know, it's kinda cool just to have a straight-up robot on the roster. And once you learn that he was actually a toy for the NES, the whole idea of him shooting lasers at gods is really fun. This is a joke character that always lands for me, not really much else to say. Credit where credit is due, Piranha Plant is the ideal way to do a joke character, because it's a joke that everyone gets. Everyone knows who Piranha Plant is, a generic Mario enemy, and everyone understands the absurdity of it being its own Smash fighter. To that end, I love Piranha Plant's inclusion. It's an incredibly goofy character that everyone can laugh at together. I might be harsher on this guy if the DLC that followed wasn't as good as it was, but it was, so Piranha Plant gets a thumbs up from me. I really thought Min Min was just gonna feel like a promotional pick, but there doesn't seem to be new ARMS content on the horizon, so it seems like the Smash team just wanted to represent a newer property before it completely lost relevancy. That's pretty cool. It's one of those things where if something like Rhythm Heaven or Golden Sun had come out at just the right time, they might have gotten this treatment and would have been immortalized on the Smash roster, so I'm glad whatever ARMS fans out there get to have that, even if to most, ARMS isn't all that cool a series to represent. I also like that they went with specifically Min Min, because Smash needs more female characters, not just palette swaps, like full-blown female characters. I'm currently playing through Earthbound for the first time. It's pretty delightful and helps me appreciate Ness a lot more. What a bizarre little series for Smash to include so prominently. Can't help but love the weird pick. Again, like what I said with Min Min, it seems like Earthbound was just around at the right time and got lucky with getting into Smash, and that's fantastic for fans of that series. All we need is Ninten as an Echo, and we could have all 3 Earthbound protagonists in Smash. That'd be pretty cool. Hey, another third-party fighting game character ranked relatively low on the list? Sorry, but it is so hard to get excited about these guys. These kinds of characters come off as so much more bland to me than even the sword fighters. Thankfully, Terry didn't have nearly as bad timing as Kazuya did. I also love how he effectively represents the entirety of SNK's catalog, really getting your money's worth with that one. Not an incredibly exciting pick for me, but certainly one I can appreciate a lot more. The rebirth of the Kid Icarus franchise after Pit's inclusion is one of those magical Smash moments. As a cool angel character from a retro game, Pit's already pretty rad, but this Pit design eventually inspiring Kid Icarus Uprising is what I adore about Super Smash Bros. What a fun character with tons of personality. He's only this low because I have to take into account the context of his initial inclusion. I'm sure no one knew who the hell this guy was when he got into Brawl. I really like Pokemon X and Y. They were the games that basically got me back into Pokemon after a long hiatus. It's clear that Greninja is pretty popular as far as Pokemon go, so in hindsight I'm really glad it's here. But what really elevates it is that amazing reveal trailer. Talk about a Pokemon fan's cinematic dream. Absolutely gorgeous. You know, talking about Greninja kinda makes me want to go back and play through Kalos again. Maybe someday. Game & Watch is the kind of character where, even if you don't get the specific reference, you get the concept just by watching him move, and that's really cool. Anyone can look at Game & Watch and recognize him as a representation of old-school, graphically and powerfully inferior video games, even if they have no idea what a Game & Watch is. As far as joke characters go, Game & Watch is one that never really gets old for me, and I think that's because my understanding of the joke evolved as I learned more about Nintendo. The more I think about it, the more I really like this character's inclusion. The last of the newer generation Pokemon reps, Lucario honestly feels like a secondary mascot for the series at this point. It pops up a lot in promotional material, and rightfully so. This is just a really cool Pokemon with a very unique canon skill set. Not to mention this was the first and still only fighting type to be included in this fighting game. Of course, I'm glad that Lucario is here to rep Sinnoh, even if I personally would have preferred some Hone stuff, but I guess I can't complain, we did get that Rayquaza boss fight after all. Wolf is somehow so much more exciting than either of the other Star Fox characters just because of his status as a villain. But not just any villain, a relatively fast-paced villain. We don't really have too many of those in Smash, especially back in Brawl. Wolf really comes off as a wild animal, hell-bent on victory, and that kind of character is really fun to play as. Honestly, if Star Fox was a more prominent series today, Wolf could probably crack the top 30 of this list. But alas, here we are. Duck Hunt honestly doesn't even feel like a joke character. They absolutely deserve to be here. Duck Hunt is still one of the best-selling games of all time, and this iconic laughing dog is at the center of it. I love how he represents all those early NES Zapper games. It really adds to the charm of the character concept. I'm honestly just surprised this character didn't get in any sooner. It seems like they should have been prioritized over Ice Climbers at least. If Pit lost points because no one knew who he was at his initial inclusion, then it only makes sense for Palutena to rank higher now that people actually want Kid Icarus characters. Palutena is an awesome inclusion not just for that sweet Kid Icarus Uprising representation, but because she is literally a goddess. How fun is that to get to run around and murder people as a god? Also gotta shout out her incredible reveal trailer. Watching Link and Pit fight in that style really makes me want a proper Super Smash Bros. Show. Listen, Corrin and Roy come off as promotions, and the Fire Emblem popularity just wasn't there when Ike got in. Byleth got into Smash well after Fire Emblem Three Houses was clearly successful enough to earn a rep, and I really like that game, so let me be happy about this. I will fully acknowledge that there are too many Fire Emblem characters and that Byleth's reveal and release was incredibly poorly timed, but I personally direct that hate towards Corrin, not Byleth. It's a cool inclusion from a newer game, and they actually represent all the different Fire Emblem weapon classes. That was sorely needed. Sheik is an incredibly odd choice in hindsight. She was obviously included as part of the character swapping concept with Zelda, but now that they're separated, why is Sheik here? Well, I feel like Sheik represents Ocarina of Time in a very unique way, a showcase of that moment where we all realized Zelda could kinda be badass, and when representing Zelda in a fighting game, it makes a lot of sense to include that. Even though pretty much all of Sheik's moveset is completely original, I'm glad she's around to show the less regal side of this famous character. I feel like they work just fine separate, they feel oddly appropriate, and just imagine if Sheik were revealed today, what a cool surprise idea that would be. I don't have much to say here, I have absolutely no experience with Bayonetta as a character or as a game series. All I know is that she feels like she's a Nintendo character given how Nintendo publishes her games now, so her inclusion is cool in my book. Generally I'm more resistant to mature characters in Nintendo stuff, but Bayonetta works and I know her games are beloved, so yeah, sure, I like her. It's weird to think about how many games Wario has under his belt, even though pretty much everyone knows him first and foremost for his appearances in Mario games. All that said, Wario is tons of fun, and as another villain from the world of Mario, he's great. Crude, greedy, and ridiculous. I'm really glad he's around and representing the strangely delightful WarioWare games. I love Kirby. I love Kirby so much, you guys, and this big doofus is part of that love. Waddling around as a big penguin with a giant hammer is delightful. I would say including the original antagonist of the Kirby series is a given, but we had to wait until Brawl to get this guy. I'm glad we eventually got him, but why the hell wasn't he a lock for Melee? Anyway, like Wario, it's always fun to have a sillier villain to play as. You can get a lot of fun mileage out of characters like that, so I'm glad we've got these big lugs on the roster. So why the hell is this half-baked clone so high up? Well, simply put, Young Link kind of feels like the default Link to me. Like, think of the original NES Zelda, or A Link to the Past, or Link's Awakening, or my favorite Zelda, A Link Between Worlds. Link in those games always came off as this young kid thrust into adventure by fate. That's not to say that the idea of adult Link as the default is incorrect. It's clear based on Ocarina of Time's popularity and Link's designs in the past few 3D Zeldas that most people view adult Link as the proper Link, but I just think it's really cool that young Link is here as an option, showcasing not just the first half of Ocarina of Time, but a time where Link felt like just a kid. The 2D Zeldas don't really get much love in Smash, so even if this idea is just in my head, I think young Link's inclusion is incredibly cool because of it. Similarly, it doesn't feel like newer Mario games really get all that much attention in Smash. The stages are certainly there, but the characters themselves all feel representative of everything pre-Sunshine. So having Rosalina here helps to kind of modernize the Mario roster a bit. The Galaxy games are amazing, and Rosalina is a fantastic character, so her inclusion is really big for me. Not to mention, it's another all-powerful goddess we get to fight as. That's a big plus. Kinda weird to have these guys up here, but I think the Miis have really come into their own as Smash has gone on. Firstly, having a customizable Smash character and a way to insert yourself into Smash was always going to be the appeal of the Miis, and that is fantastic. But additionally, the Miis have been a fun way to kind of sort of get other characters into Smash. Between Sans, Cuphead, Vault Boy, Shantae, Doomslayer, Dante, Geno, and Bomberman, the roster of Mii costumes is so impressive it could hold its own video. It's not the same, but it's something to help us get some of our other favorites into Smash. I didn't love Animal Crossing New Leaf when I played it, but I can't deny just how delightful Isabelle was. With how massive Animal Crossing has gotten, getting a new rep for the series is totally worthwhile, and yet again, I'm glad they opted for a female character. It's still weird to think about how long it took to get an Animal Crossing character in Smash, but it was certainly worth the wait. Couldn't be happier with this character. Okay, this is the last time I'll complain about fighting game characters. In all seriousness, Ryu is an excellent choice for a third party given how big Street Fighter II was and its connection to the SNES. And as the first third-party fighting game character, he introduced a lot of the ideas surrounding them, and they were much cooler the first time around. This was also the first time one company got multiple representatives, which for me was less exciting, but I'm sure for many opened the doors for a lot of other potential characters. Overall, I really don't have any problems with Ryu's inclusion. I blame Terry and Kazuya for dragging my enjoyment of Ryu down with them. How do I explain this? I really like Minecraft, I played it a lot in middle school, but I never really wanted Steve in Smash. I always felt like he would visually clash with the rest of the roster in an awkward way, and I was totally right about that. But I can't deny how massive of a character Steve is. If Smash was going to call itself a celebration of gaming, it needed Steve. I guess there's a part of me that's bothered because Steve's inclusion felt more like a way to promote Smash to a new audience, seeing as Minecraft is much bigger than Smash. But hey, he's still pretty high on the list. It's also awesome that Steve kind of acts as the first indie character to make it in. It's kind of a cheat since he is owned by Microsoft, but it's something. I never really understood why so many people wanted Shulk to get into Smash 4. I've seen a full playthrough of the original Xenoblade Chronicles. It's a very cool game, but it seemed like everyone was pining for this guy when the game he's from wasn't all that popular. There's probably some major context I'm completely missing, but either way, I really like Shulk as a character inclusion. Can't complain about properly listening to fan demand. The first Fire Emblem character, little did we know what would come from this. Marth in Melee is another one of those fantastic success stories to come from Smash. The West literally would not have Fire Emblem games if not for Marth's Smash inclusion, and as a Fire Emblem fan, I really appreciate that. Marth is also one of the few Fire Emblem protagonists to have more than one starring role. Knowing that, as well as his standing as the first Fire Emblem protagonist, using him as effectively the mascot for the series in Smash is really fitting and cool. He was also the first traditional sword fighter in the game, which might cause some eye rolls now, but I do appreciate what was a unique playstyle back in the good old days. Despite knowing less about Xenoblade Chronicles 2 than I do the original, I was far more aware of the fans pining for a character from that game to get into Smash, and I actually understood it this time since Xenoblade Chronicles had really started coming into its own as a series. And once again, it's very cool that they opted for the female characters rather than the obvious choice of the male protagonist. They brought back the Zelda Sheik switching mechanic from the dead, which is greatly appreciated. Plus, generally, Pyra and Mythra work much better in that sense than Sheik and Zelda ever did. Definitely a worthy inclusion. What a unique character. There are other fighters that have to deal with resource management mechanics, but Olimar lives and dies by it, and I think that's very cool. Of course, I love that Pikmin gets to be represented in Smash. That series deserves as much love as it can get. This feels like another one of those instances where Pikmin was just in the right place at the right time in order to make it into Smash. I feel bad saying that because I want to regard Pikmin as a strong, ongoing series that Nintendo will continue to support, but the lack of a Pikmin 4 really makes me worry in that regard. If Splatoon hadn't done as well as it did, I feel like Inkling's inclusion would have been more exciting. With how well Splatoon did, Inkling was really just an inevitability. But I still love seeing Inkling here just because it's been cool to watch as Splatoon became fully integrated into the Nintendo brand. Seeing Splatoon stuff pop up in marketing and group shots of Nintendo characters was really cool. Smash was really just the cherry on top. It's kind of weird that I'm saying all this because I've never actually played a Splatoon game. Online multiplayer stuff just isn't my scene. But seeing this property blossom has really been so fun to watch. Man, Little Mac is such a cool inclusion. This is one of those characters that Sakurai apparently added to primarily appeal to the Western fanbase that wanted him, and that's really appreciated. Just watching his reveal trailer sells the hype energy this character brought with him. But this is yet another instance where I wish Smash would elevate this franchise because we haven't had anything Punch-Out related since the Wii, and that sucks. One last thing, it really bothers me that the default version of Little Mac's stage is Smash themed. You have to push a certain button when selecting it to ever get the actual Punch-Out version. What the hell is up with that? I want to play on the Punch-Out version all the time. The extra step is really annoying. Why does it feel like Snake is the most out there third-party character even after so many others? Probably just because Metal Gear Solid doesn't have as strong a connection to Nintendo. Even so, I can't deny how cool it is that Snake is in this game. It's incredibly bizarre, but cool. It's the kind of character where I'm glad there's one of them. But if there are any more, I'd probably be annoyed like with the fighting game character situation. Any more human army guys and I'm done. But yeah, I can't deny the hype of the first ever third-party character, but my lack of Metal Gear knowledge doesn't leave me with much else to say. Sephiroth is such an iconic villain and an absolute blast to play as, you really feel incredibly powerful when playing as him. As cool as he is, I can't help but be kind of annoyed by his inclusion. Like, more Final Fantasy VII? Really? Of all the potential Square Enix properties you could have represented, that's what you went with. It's cool that Sephiroth literally followed Cloud to Smash and even managed to bring better spirits and music with him, but his reveal was so bittersweet because of what he could have been. That blow has been softened quite a bit thanks to Sora, but still. I just complained a lot, but remember, this guy is very highly ranked despite that. That's how iconic and cool he is. Okay, the top 20. These are the characters that I basically have no complaints with. They are all excellent inclusions. Starting us off, Samus Aran. It's easy to take for granted Metroid's presence in Smash Bros., but Metroid really didn't have much to work with back in 1999. The last game, Super Metroid, had come out in 1994. Samus had not made an appearance on the N64 yet. It's a miracle she was included, and it's great because she's an awesome character and Metroid is an awesome series. I adore Super Metroid, and I've loved going through Metroid Dread recently. As Metroid's place on Nintendo's priority list continues to constantly fluctuate, it's nice to know that Samus will always have a place on the Smash roster, and thus Metroid will never really be gone. There are so many cool things about Robin. Of course, he is the primary representative of Fire Emblem Awakening, the game that single-handedly saved Fire Emblem. He's a mage, making for a far more unique concept when compared to all of the other Fire Emblem characters, and despite being a player surrogate character, he's got a well-defined personality that makes his inclusion fun from a character perspective. Easily the best Fire Emblem rep in the game. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I know anything about Dragon Quest, so let's all imagine that right now I'm talking about how influential, big, and popular the series is in Japan, and how worthy of an inclusion it is. In the meantime, I'll just talk about how much I love his moveset. Playing Hero feels like playing with items on, except you're the only one that knows how to use them, and your friend who absolutely hates them just has to suffer. As much as I love the command menu, it's the critical hits that really just make everyone around me want to rage quit. It's the best. Yoshi is another inclusion I feel like we all take for granted. Yoshi's series of games doesn't really feel all that prominent in the public eye. If Yoshi's story didn't come out when it did, we probably would have had to wait quite a while for Yoshi to get in, so I'm really glad he's here. Yoshi is probably my favorite Mario character. He's so adorable and fun. His games don't really capture my attention all that well, but anytime he pops up in a Mario game, it's a great time. He's my go-to for Mario Party and is incredibly useful in Mario Super Sluggers, unironically one of my favorite games ever. Remember that block of time where Yoshi hadn't been shown off for Smash 4 and everyone got worried about it? Just goes to show how much love we all have for this green dino. We can't stand the idea of him being gone. This has been the Yoshi appreciation section of the video. I hope you all enjoyed. I've always really liked Diddy Kong. Something about small characters who primarily utilize their agility is very appealing to me. This guy finally managed to get us another DK rep, something that was long overdue. The Donkey Kong games are kind of defined by their inclusion of secondary characters like Diddy Kong. After all, your two hits are represented by the two characters, so it was honestly weird that DK was going solo in Smash for so long. Glad he doesn't have to anymore. Joker is an inclusion that I appreciate a lot more retroactively now that I've actually played Persona 5. What an awesome game. But anyway, what really makes Joker special in Smash is how he was revealed. That Game Awards trailer was something else. Actually having the Phantom Thieves take over the screens, turning the calling card to reveal the Smash letter, it was too perfect. I could complain about Persona not being big on Nintendo consoles, but I really don't care, and I don't think you do either. Joker is just too cool of a character to complain about. Now, if I was any good at impressions, this would probably be where a bunch of obligatory Persona impressions go, but yeah, that doesn't seem worth it. Ah yes, the first Smash 4 reveal, and finally the first Animal Crossing character in Smash. Even in retrospect, having Villager around is cool to me because he's styled after the pre-New Leaf games, effectively representing that style while Isabelle reps the New Leaf New Horizons style. Incredible to see how creative they had to get with this moveset, really paved the way for other hard-to-conceptualize characters. I'd love to say more, but at this point Animal Crossing kinda speaks for itself. I love Kirby. I love Kirby so much, you guys. King Dedede kinda felt like an inevitability, but Meta Knight? There was no guarantee we'd get him, but I'm glad we did, because he's awesome. This dark, broody sword wielder with the same proportions as lovable fluffball Kirby, what's not to love? He's cool, quick, stylish, fun, just an all-around fantastic inclusion, and great Kirby representation, something Smash needs as much of as it can get. Yeah, I was really hoping for a bandana Waddle Dee at some point, because Kirby just makes me happy. The more Kirby in the world, the better. So this might be an unpopular choice, but I really like the inclusion of Bowser Jr. A sillier sub-villain, an interesting concept with the Koopa Clown car, awesome representation with all the Koopalings in there. This character really feels like a perfect storm of good ideas. And I don't know, I've always really liked Bowser Jr. as a character. Again, smaller character needing to use other means in order to succeed in battle, it's cool to me. I remember really pining for this guy in Smash 4. Generally, I just wanted as many villains as possible, and this was when I had a lot of experience fighting. I bet it's pretty cathartic for some of us to be able to beat this little twerp up. Okay, so let's get the obvious stuff out of the way. Awesome villain, cool new Metroid rep, big fan request for a long time, those are all great reasons to love Ridley in Smash. But I want to focus on how cool it feels to play as a giant, violent, sporadic dragon that takes no prisoners. I think that's really why so many of us wanted Ridley in Smash. We wanted to murder everyone as a giant fire-breathing dragon. Charizard was a little too cuddly, no, we wanted to drag opponents across the floor, stab them through the heart, then fly away to claim another victim. That's the real appeal of this character. Some liberties had to be taken when translating the character to Smash, but the end result really makes you feel like you are this monster wreaking havoc, and that's awesome. Oh boy, top 10, here we go. King K. Rool. This guy screams Saturday morning cartoon villain, and that's great. I always really wanted King K. Rool because he was one of my favorite heavy hitters in Mario Super Sluggers, and I cannot contain myself when I was watching his reveal trailer. Man, what a fun inclusion. He's so goofy and random, but still really threatening, a really impressive balance. I realize we've been on a stretch of villains for a bit here, kinda letting my biases show, huh? So let's keep this brief and get off the villain train for a bit. I don't really know anything about Castlevania, but you really don't have to in order to appreciate Simon's inclusion. This is one of those characters that a lot of people probably thought was a Nintendo character since he was so prominent on the NES. Castlevania being in Smash is definitely one of those coming home moments that people like to talk about with Smash. And even if you are completely unaware of what a Castlevania is, this is some badass vampire hunter, that's awesome. It's also cathartic to see Metroid and Castlevania in the same game, given that they are the namesakes of the Metroidvania genre. Just another one of those magical moments only Smash could really create. Unfortunately, a lot of what I just said about Simon could apply to Mega Man. Classic NES character, super cool concept, who doesn't love a super fighting robot? So I'm kind of left grasping at straws here. Unlike Castlevania, I am far more familiar with Mega Man, so there's that. I will say, the positive reaction to Mega Man's inclusion in Smash seems to have gotten Capcom's attention since it did not seem like something like Mega Man 11 would have been able to happen without it. Smash really does have a way of breathing life into series that have been long forgotten, even by other companies. I guess I'll take this moment to also mention how cool I think Monster Hunter's representation in Smash is, since it's another Capcom property. I know people wanted a full character, but I love that they just went with a boss monster, really fitting given the whole idea of the series. Sonic the goddamn Hedgehog. I know Snake came first, but this really feels like the first big third-party inclusion. Ask anyone who they'd want as a third party in Smash before Brawl, and they would say Sonic. The rivalry between the Blue Blur and Mario was legendary, and being able to officially play out that battle in Smash was phenomenal. And the great personality that Sonic brings with him makes for one of the most obnoxiously fun characters to play as. Honestly, Sonic makes a very real case to be at the #1 spot on this list. He is that big of an inclusion. It's mostly going to be personal biases that keep him from that top spot. It's my list after all. Super Smash Bros. Brawl was my first ever Smash game. When I started looking up more stuff about the series, my biggest disappointment was finding out that Mewtwo was in Melee but got cut for Brawl. The idea of playing as Mewtwo was so incredible to me. It still is now. This is the only real secret boss character to be in Smash. Something so powerful you're not even meant to encounter it until after you beat the game. Something truly legendary. The only character that even comes close to that kind of legendary status is Sephiroth. Not to mention how Mewtwo is the unofficial villain character for Pokemon. Frankly, there was no better choice. This monstrosity of psychic power is one of the coolest Smash inclusions by far. There's a reason everyone wanted it back in Smash 4 so badly. I see a lot of people describe Sora's inclusion in Smash as one of those coming home instances. This never made sense to me. I love Kingdom Hearts, but that is PlayStation first and foremost, not Nintendo. I think what people are trying to get at is how Sora as a character feels like this childhood mascot with an obnoxiously positive personality, something that fits right in with Nintendo's colorful cast. To that end, seeing Nintendo cooperate with Disney, another company that has very similar branding and ideologies, was certainly something magical. I love Disney, I love Nintendo, I love Smash, I love Kingdom Hearts. Seeing those Mickey ears in-game is still incredibly surreal, and seeing how Sora won the Smash ballot, there really was no better way to end Smash Ultimate. Sora's inclusion is truly magical, something everyone thought would be impossible. But that's not the first time Smash did the impossible, huh? When Cloud got into Smash 4, that was when people really started calling Smash a celebration of gaming. That was when the third-party floodgates really flew open. If Cloud could get in, anyone could get in. Final Fantasy VII, famous for not being on a Nintendo console, was now in Smash. This character really transcends the game he's from. I sure as hell hadn't played Final Fantasy VII when Cloud got revealed, but I also knew exactly how huge this was. Not to mention how massive Final Fantasy as a series is. Cloud's inclusion really felt like when Smash evolved. He was the precursor to every other huge, out there reveal. Some might credit Sonic or Snake with that, but to me it was absolutely Cloud Strife. Anyway, let's talk about this pizza with a slice missing. Cloud was when people started calling Smash a celebration of gaming, but I doubt people would have said that if Pac-Man wasn't around. This is one of the first characters people think of when they hear video games. With Namco developing Smash 4, you'd think Pac-Man would have been obvious and not very exciting, but no one knew how or if Pac-Man could actually be included. How do you design a moveset for this thing? Everyone wanted him, but no one knew how they'd do it. Making him a representation of all of retro Namco was definitely a great move. Really makes his inclusion feel all-encompassing. Not to mention the trio of Pac-Man, Sonic, and Mega Man felt like the quintessential set of Smash third parties. If we had to cut every third party but 3, these guys would be the ones to stick around. They just fit in so perfectly with the rest of the Nintendo crew. Thinking about it now, all 3 of the characters at the top of this ranking really do feel like absolutely perfect inclusions. Once again, Smash seems to do the impossible. Banjo and Kazooie. Wow, Nintendo actually played ball with Microsoft, their direct console competitor. And not to get any enormous character like Master Chief, but for the obscure as hell Banjo and Kazooie. To me, this really speaks to Sakurai's dedication to giving the fans what they want and prioritizing what makes Smash special as a uniquely Nintendo crossover. This was the ultimate coming home character. At this point, it seems like everyone on the internet knows the sad tale of how Rare, with hit after hit under Nintendo, was sadly bought up by Microsoft, and with that, beloved properties like Banjo-Kazooie fell to ruin. Finally, that story gets a happy ending as the Bear and Bird rejoin their family in the Nintendo Hall of Fame. I'm being really overdramatic, but this is genuinely the kind of emotional reaction a lot of us had to this character getting in. Hell, I've never even played Banjo-Kazooie, and I still think this is the second best character in the entirety of Smash. Again, it was simply a perfect inclusion. Surprise! You really thought there'd be a third party at the top, huh? Nope. The best character in Smash is none other than the Pokemon Trainer. What a perfect concept. A switching character that cycles through the 3 Kanto starters, all at different evolutionary stages, showcasing the team-building mechanics of Pokemon and adapting switching Pokemon in battle, a core mechanic of the games. This character showcases all of that, plus the most beloved starters, 3 distinct types, the actual protagonist of the games, all in one fighter. This is the most natural adaptation of a character to Smash that isn't literally pulling from a 2D platformer. Not to mention the perfect selection of Pokemon to switch between. Charizard, likely the second most popular Pokemon ever, Ivysaur, a perfect compromise between the likely sluggish Venusaur and likely too simplistic Bulbasaur, and Squirtle, my favorite Pokemon ever, and I'm sure many others favored as well. Everyone talks about how Smash 4 and Ultimate character movesets are so much better at representing the characters, but Pokemon Trainer was awesome all the way back in Brawl. If Pokemon was a smaller franchise, maybe this wouldn't have earned the top spot, but everyone knows Pokemon, so everyone understands just how awesome this character is. Not just a perfect inclusion, but the most perfect inclusion in the entirety of the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate roster. Well, that was a lot. Hope you enjoyed this celebration of Smash Ultimate, charged with hot takes and wrong opinions as Smash should be. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments below. I invite the anarchy. Thanks for watching. Persona! For real? Looking cool, Joker! Yeah, that wasn't worth it.